a time, you know?
Well, during the golden age of Greece, you know, the Greeks thought that music had a mystic power to it and that it could affect people's minds and so on. And I think that there's some basis to that. When you watch a movie or a TV program or whatever, and there's a music background, it has an effect on you. You can hear certain kind of music that anticipates danger or puts you in a good mood and so on.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
so we aren't always conscious of that, but those kind of things are happening with music.
Can you teach, especially a child, how to appreciate music like that?
I think a lot of that is built into us, okay? The feeling, the emotions. Music is very emotional. And a good teacher will talk about that, the impact of music, how certain chords, how certain notes, certain keys and so on will affect music. Beethoven wrote certain songs in certain keys, he said, because a particular key had a particular kind of sound. I mean, you could play the same song in any key, and it would sound the same to us. But to him, his ears were so sensitive, even though he was deaf, he had the feeling that a certain key, the key of A or the key of D minor, had a certain effect on people.
It's fascinating. Well, listen, we'll get some questions from these guys, young budding musicians.
What makes a song a classic?
You were just talking about Beethoven.
Okay.
How does Beethoven write a song?
Okay, what makes a song a classic? Actually, all songs could be considered to become a classic, meaning that it has such a strong melody and such strong words, if it has lyrics, that it hangs around for years and years, regardless of what kind of songs are popular at the time. Beethoven's music, yes, we call classical music, but there are songs from the 30s, from the 40s, from the 50s, you know, in early rock and so on, that we consider classic, some of the early Beatles
So there are
tunes.
classics from, the classics do reflect the times then, right?
Sure.
Can you give us some examples of that?
Sure. The 50s, that was historically, you know, it was after the Second World War. The Vietnam War was going on for some years, but music was changing from the big band era to the formation of rock. And, well, it started out with very simple chords, the 1, 4, 5, 7 chords. Now, those 4 chords, I think almost every song in the 50s was built on those 4 chords, such as Blue Moon, you saw me standing alone. Songs like that. Heart and soul, I fell in love with you, lost control, the way your fool would do madly.
How about the 60s?
About the 60s?
What can you tell us about that?
Okay. The 60s. 60s were a time of protest. Bob Dylan did a lot of protest songs, anti-war feelings. There were some students killed at Kent State University, so there were songs that came out of that. Bob Dylan was probably best known for this. How many roads must a man walk down before you can call him a man? Songs like that.
So there's a definite pattern. It really strikes me that music is almost like a biography of a whole generation.
It reflects
and it keeps
society.
building on.
Reflects society.
Yeah.
Why is there a struggle between generation and generation regarding music and musical tastes?
Well, again, like we were saying, music reflects society. Your generation will have something probably to protest against your older generation. We like to, you get to be a certain age and you want to identify yourself, be yourself, identify your own generation, and a part of that is the music. So you have a certain kind of music. Some people grew up with the Beatles, so they identified with that. Maybe their parents hated it, but they identified with the Beatles. Some people identify with the Rolling Stones today. Other people identify with classical music.
Do musical styles repeat themselves?
Oh, yes. I think right now we're in an age of nostalgia. We listen to a lot of songs from the 40s, from the 50s, early rock tunes, for instance, like some of those that I was doing. We hear a lot of from the 50s and the early 60s.
Ben?
What is your favorite type of song?
You've had exposure to all sorts of music and all sorts of neat songs. What is your favorite?
Well, I guess classical and folk are my two. I guess I'd have to place them side by side.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that, you know, you can play both with the guitar, too, can't you?
That's right.
I guess that makes it handy.
It's kind of interesting, we're talking about the guitar. The guitar is considered to be very akin to the piano because both instruments can be used as solo instruments or as an accompaniment. And
well, why don't you give us
this is kind of like a portable piano in a sense.
Give us a little bit of some of your really favorite stuff.
Okay. You who are on the road must have a code that you can live by, and so become yourself, because the past is just a goodbye, and teach your children well. Their parents' hell will slowly go by. Don't you ever ask them why. If they told you, you would cry. So just look at them and sigh, and know they love you.
That's nice. I like it. What's up for the coming week?
Ask a Silly Question will return after these messages.
What if you bought this Simmons Beauty Rest flatbed and then discovered you could have purchased this Craftmatic 2 adjustable bed for less?
You mean I could be reading,
Eating, watching TV.
and relaxing in a Craftmatic adjustable bed, and it costs less than
This Simmons Beauty Rest flatbed?
This Stearns and Foster?
The sort of perfect sleeper.
and this Sealy Posturepedic flatbed that I bought on sale?
That's right. This Craftmatic 2 adjustable bed costs less. And to prove it, we're going to give you this fabulous Polaroid camera free just for previewing our beds, even if you don't buy your adjustable bed from Craftmatic. Call now so we can mail you our adjustable bed catalog and this coupon for your free Polaroid camera.
In U.S., call 1-800-228-1300, 1-800-228-1300. In Canada, call 1-800-268-6367, 1-800-268-6367. We now return to Ask a Silly Question.
What's the story?
Why would someone want to read this book?
Because it just tells about how the girls live and how it's hard to go through all these classes they go to and everything.
You read about their lives, huh? Well, tell us about it. How does the story go?
Well, it starts out with this guy, his name is Great Uncle Matthew, and they call him Gum. He collects fossils, and on one of his voyages, he sees this ship that's gotten a shipwreck, and everybody else has died, and there's a little baby floating in a little life preserver. So he takes the baby, and he sends it to his niece, Sylvia, and then he leaves her there, and then he goes off on another voyage. And then when he's somewhere in Russia, it's this guy whose wife had died, and he's in the hospital, and he's dying of an illness. And the doctors and nurses, he has a child, and they don't know what to do with her, so he takes it.
So that's two people.
Yeah,
that,
the first one's name was Pauline, and the next one, they named her Petrova.
And he's sending them to his niece. And is there anybody else? Are there any
There's
other
another one.
Oh, really?
Her name is Posey, and it's this lady who's a dancer whose husband has died. And she's poor and she doesn't have enough money and she can't take the baby with her when she's dancing.
So you were telling us that it's about the story of these three girls' lives. What happens when they all meet?
Well, they all meet and then they name their last name Fossil because the guy collects fossils because they didn't have a last name. And then Sylvia, she doesn't have very much money because Gum's always gone. So they start taking dancing lessons because it happens in England, and when you're 12, you can get a license and you can dance for money.
Oh, I see. So the three of them learned ballet at this boarding house, right?
They go to a school for
That
it.
boarding school. That's where they learn the ballet. Thus the name Ballet Shoes, I would imagine. Then what happens?
And then they all, after the first two, Pauline and Petrova, then they go in plays and stuff. And they earn money and they give it to Sylvia. And then eventually, Gum, he comes back. And then they all go their separate ways.
I'm interested in that, though. You know, the three people come together for a part of their lives, and then they split up. Do they all end up dancing for the rest of their lives? How do they...
The youngest one goes with this famous ballerina guy, and she goes into Czechoslovakia, and she starts taking ballet lessons there. And the other one, a guy saw her in a Hollywood film when she was doing a play, so he takes her to Hollywood to be in a film. And the other one, she liked engines and stuff, so she went into aviation.
They really chose different ways to live their lives, didn't they? Think tank. Should kids be required to take competency tests in school? Everyone assumes that at the end of the year, when June rolls around, that you will automatically be promoted to the next grade come next fall. Now, the problem is, what about kids that aren't quite ready to be promoted? What do you do with these kids? Well, our friends here from South Lyon have some thoughts on that. And also, they've been thinking a lot about, should kids be required to take competency tests to be promoted? Okay, you guys, here's your chance. This is an important topic because we face it every day in school. So let's hear some of your thoughts.
Well, I think sorta and sorta not. I think you should take one at the ending of that grade you're in, at the beginning of the next grade. And if you don't if you pass at the last year, like at the first one you took, then you don't have to take the next one. But if you had problems with it, you should take the one at the beginning of the year. And if you don't pass that one, you should have to go back to that class.
So you agree with competency tests?
Yeah.
That's a neat solution, though, giving them at the end and the beginning of the next year. Who has a problem with competency tests? Who thinks that they're not too worthwhile? You gotta be kidding.
I have one over here.
You do? All right, let's hear about it.
One in the whole class. Okay, Dale, why don't you think so?
Well, because someone has lots of problems and pretty much, like in reading and spelling, they'd have to write down everything in the test, and they might not be able to read the writing or something. They might mark everything straight off wrong, and to them it might be right. So they'd flunk.
But if you think that they couldn't read the words, don't you think that they should go back again?
In a way, yes, in a way, no. I think they should have, they should get a tutor instead of staying in school, so they have most of the day by themselves instead of school all day long.
You know, that brings up an interesting point. You know, everybody, kids and adults alike, grow in different ways all the time. And I think what you're saying is that sometimes you have strengths in one area and weaknesses in another area, and a competency test might have trouble seeing that. Why are competency tests good?
Well, because if someone's going to be rotten at something, like let's say he can't do math and he gets by through an engineering course, he might make a defective building or something, like in San Francisco, and they have an earthquake and splat, the thing's gonna fall all over the people in the office.
I think you should take competency tests because when you go to college and stuff, some teachers they don't care if you learn how to do it and they just pass you on so they can get their next grade in. And when you go to college and stuff, you won't know how to write or read, and then you can't get an important career or anything. I
think we've got to take the responsibility ourselves. Right here, you guys are the ones that are getting the education and all the neat learning. And when you get right down to it, you guys are the ones that are responsible. And I think you can accept that challenge.
That's a wrap.
There's a little monster in every one of us that can destroy a forest as long as we treat fire like a toy. Please.
For a knockout good time, catch the classic fun of the Little Rascals.
You said it. Darn tootin'.
This morning at 9:30 on Channel 4.